Okay, sorry, we're back. The camera just died. Unfortunately, this thing has a habit of that. We might try to upgrade at some point in the future.
Rarely is the question asked, is our children learning?
My fellow Americans.
Corporations are people, my friend.
Our country is in serious trouble.
I did not send classified material, and I did not receive any material that was marked or designated classified.
But man is not free unless government is limited.
Bringing you opinions on historic, current, and international politics. Welcome to the Unnamed Political Podcast.
We're on free speech zones, and kind of, I guess, if we want to extend that too, so we can go a little bit longer on this topic, maybe 8 minutes, but just kind of the atmosphere of college students in general nowadays. We've been seeing a great number of protests for not just claims of racism, which actually, let's focus on that for a little. Have you noticed all the protests against the founding fathers and previous presidents at some of these universities?
No, but I could see how it's against like Andrew Jackson and stuff.
Oh, no,
it's Indians.
Thomas Jefferson, Woodrow Wilson's a big one.
No.
At Princeton, they have, the university presidents have just said that they will consider removing anything to do with him.
That's political correctness.
His racist influence. I understand that you see these issues there, but I kind of have two things.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say one, I would say if you understand the history of the universities, applying to it might not be your best option. If you're going to spend the whole time, rather than learning from the university, protesting it. If you want to do that, I think you're at a better position being outside.
Mm-hmm. You wouldn't want to go there if you know.
If it's so
for example,
terrible.
University of Missouri.
Yeah.
Assume.
But
yeah.
But also, with doing that, I feel if you believe that what Woodrow Wilson did was racist, then by removing it, you're completely whitewashing history and you're preventing people from learning about it. If you want to do that, say, how about we also teach that this stuff happened, but you don't need to then say, let's get rid of everything to do with Thomas Jefferson because in the Declaration of Independence, they didn't ban slavery because that makes him a bigot now for some reason.
That's true. If we got rid of all the stuff about like slavery, I mean...
Then you're completely whitewashing history. It's idiotic.
Learn from your mistakes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I suppose the other aspect of a lot of these protests have been big protests for just kind of social justice.
Yeah.
The other thing, like big political correctness moves.
Yeah.
Not just history. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, I apologize for saying this, but I think the microaggressions, all that, it's completely ridiculous.
I mean, what's the goal? You just want to get rid of it, make people feel better?
I mean, if it's this country was founded on freedom of speech, but now apparently the Constitution is racist according to some of these universities.
And we're going to just get rid of it.
It's still what this country is based off of. Mm-hmm. And there was a list from University of California of microaggressions, and this isn't me making up, these are true. America is a land of opportunity. Things of that nature are considered microaggressions, which basically mean racist statements that you should be encouraged not to say.
That's crazy. That's from University of California?
Yeah. I mean, that is a very reputable school, and they're doing that.
They're doing microaggression?
It's completely crazy. I was shown a list of it one time, and this website where people can post their microaggressions. And microaggressions, it's literally just things such as like, oh, they looked at me, they said like, oh, you have very like a nice hairstyle or something. It's like, oh, because they think it's racist because you generally assume people of that ethnicity or something have poor hair.
It's crazy.
Anything can be racist now, which I think is very unfortunate because, I think we've made so much progress from segregated days in terms of civil rights and everything, and by doing this, you aren't helping the movement. You aren't saying we've been this far, let's keep going. You're just saying, oh, we're back in the dark
We're almost
days.
Backtracking, doing all this stuff.
You're trying to create an environment where you feel victimized so certain people can feel special.
You want to put yourself above others, I think is a good point, too.
I think definitely. I mean, I think if you've seen kind of a lot of these kind of trends online with people kind of saying like, oh, I'm so victimized for all of these reasons.
Right.
I think one of the biggest ones I've seen is people with mental health, which I think is definitely getting a lot more attention than it has in the past.
Yeah.
But one of the points that I've seen that I think is very important that people need to make, if you want mental health to be treated as a real condition, which it is in many cases, then you should. Like, there are definitely people with schizophrenia, people with autism, people with Alzheimer's, who we should treat like that. Definitely. But if you look at it in real life, not every single physical condition is cancer or Parkinson's or something.
Right.
So we have a lot of instances, at least I've seen from people I've talked to, people are claiming that their lives are extremely different and all these things because of having things such as ADHD. Yeah. Which is attention deficit and like hyperactive disorder.
Something like that.
Along those lines. And it's basically where you have trouble focusing. And
right.
But the thing is, it's probably one of, if not the most overdiagnosed instance
that's true.
anything in the U.S. at this point. Approximately, I was reading one site where it said upwards of 60% of diagnoses, is it diagnosi?
I think diagnosis is fine.
Are for people who don't have the condition at all,
Right.
which I think, one, is unfortunate, because then people who actually are suffering from it are now being marginalized, because if everybody has it, it's no longer as big of a deal.
You're also treated differently if you have it, too.
Right, because now you're part of this whole group of people who probably don't. And if people claim they want all this special treatment for it, it's kind of, if you want to compare it to real things like something common, it's like people with the common cold wanting to be treated as though they have cancer.
Right.
They want the special, like, everybody feeling sorry for them and all that.
No, that's a good point.
That's right.
And people are also talking about the economy, right? I mean, these
Oh, yeah.
protests, you know,
So that's the
$15
other big-
wages, and you can't actually have that. Because if you get a $15 an hour wage, you can't hire enough people because you're not making enough money, and you're eventually just going to run out of business. And I think many people don't understand that.
Like, when you're looking at it, I think raising minimum wage at some point is probably necessary just due to inflation and everything, but when you look at it in a world where things are becoming so automated, the second it becomes cheaper for a company to just automate an employee's job, they will do it.
I mean, a drastic change of a federal $15 an hour wage right now, just to do it instantly would be crazy, and it would have drastic effects on the economy.
And the other, if you look at taxes where they're completely starting to pile up, and if you look at Bernie, like where you were saying, mentioned the economy with Bernie's whole tax plan, where they're saying we'll give you free everything, and everybody's like, oh,
Doesn't
that's
add
free.
up. Doesn't add up.
Nothing that the government provides can be free, because the government is funded by the people. So the money eventually comes from everywhere. And when you look at it, there was a very good quote I heard recently. It's like Bernie, he's promising everybody free electric cars, but he's not telling you have to buy the $7,000 batteries.
Hey, that's right.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And did you see the video on Fox Business?
Yeah, with the protester.
Yeah, would you explain?
Yeah, so it was like Fox Business Network or some business show, right?
I believe it was just the network.
Yeah, it was for the Million Students March, which is
big march. They want
huge march.
Safe spaces, $15
an hour wage, free tuition.
I believe it was abolishment of all college debt.
Yeah, that's
crazy. That means everybody has debt. It's done.
Yeah, so this girl who's some sort of like leader of that movement was interviewed by the host, and then they were talking about what their demands were, and then the host was like, how are you going to pay for that? And she struggled, and it took her almost half a minute to even attempt to answer the question. The answer that followed didn't add up at all. So
she just said tax the top 1%, like at a 90% tax rate or something.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
But unfortunately, like you see that it doesn't work. France tried to do it. France, obviously a socialist or very socialist country, tried to do it with their like billionaire tax, and all the billionaires left France.
Exactly.
So if you just tax the top 1%, you brought up that excellent points, and then the 1%ers just leave, then who is it going to go to? Eventually, I think that's the problem with socialism overall is everybody's equal, but everybody's lives equally suck.
Yeah, no one can progress. I mean, if I make a lot of money and I am a millionaire and they want to take my money, I mean, I worked hard for that money. You shouldn't have to take 90% of it. That's ridiculous.
And people just aren't going to want to do that, unfortunately. And if you have a society where you're stealing people's money and other things, I mean, we've seen this sort of thing happen in the Soviet Union and in China with farm I'm mispronounced, but where where they would take your farm, they would take business owners. It killed business and it threw millions and millions into poverty.
Caused famine and killed millions too.
I mean, I'm hoping that, and I assume that that's not going to be the result of a Sanders presidency, but we're going to see effects watered down, but still effects similar to that in the U.S., which I desperately hope doesn't happen.
Desperately hope doesn't happen.
So I think we've covered that well enough. Other world issues, any other big places you want to specifically cover?
I mean, it's about time we talk about the Paris stuff.
I suppose so. So in our most recent episode, we briefly addressed it, but we mainly just said that our thoughts and prayers were with the people of Paris. We haven't covered that as much as we should, but would you like to take this one, or at least start off?
I can start us off. So, as you know, there was a series of attacks in Paris. I'd say it was about 2 weeks ago now. That transpired.
Exactly 2 weeks, actually.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago from today, the day we're filming it, so there was a series of attacks in Paris, and upwards of 120 or so people were killed, and France has definitely stepped up their military efforts against ISIS in response. And
we've seen a whole from the European Union as a whole. I believe just this week Germany said they will be, if France supports it and is almost guaranteed to pass, they will also be sending in fighter jets to support that, and we've seen a an outpouring of support for the French people overall.
The French president's trying to make like a coalition. He went to Obama to talk about him. They're trying to like start this anti-ISIS coalition, which I already thought they had kind of set up.
I believe it was much looser, I suppose. I think they're trying to...
I think they're trying to make like directly like fight ISIS as a coalition, which is a noble cause, and I'm glad that France is leading it and we're not doing it for once. But.
No, I think that's unfortunate. It kind of shows that with under Obama, we've just kind of pulled out of everything.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, I think one of the big things with the coalition was severely weakened when the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, I believe one of his first acts in office was to stop all Canadian jets attacking ISIS.
Which is ridiculous.
Which there's...
And this was before the Paris attacks, so I wonder if he's changing his mind. He's like, let's go back in there, but I doubt it. He's gonna, I doubt it.
So obviously you're the expert on Canada on this, so you think there's any logic behind pulling out of Syria?
I just think he wants to focus on domestic policies, which is ridiculous because all he wants to focus on are like social issues, and he puts legalizing marijuana above all the other issues, which is crazy, like the economy. It's ridiculous.
If you have a president whose main goal is to get high and not stop people from killing millions, it's idiotic. Yeah. And obviously, so the Paris attacks were extremely tragic, and they bring to, I think they kind of bring it home. So we've been hearing about all these attacks, but they're usually kind of, most people seem like, oh, they're in a far-flung place or something.
Right.
But then when it happens to Paris...
Close to home.
It's, yeah, I mean, I know people who had relatives who were in the soccer stadium when the bombs went off outside. I mean, it's like, it's a place that I've never been, but people we know, like, they're like,
yeah, you have strong connections, right?
I might have vacationed there. I could have gone there when that happened.
Exactly.
But they did say, one of the big things was that the terrorists, they didn't go and hit a lot of these, like, big, like, touristy locations, like the Eiffel Tower or something. They went, I think, and this is kind of part of their new strategy, they went for, like, local places where they knew, like, a lot of Parisans, I believe it's a proper term, would be just random kind of places where they knew that like the people of Paris would be congregated, and it's just extremely tragic. And we've been seeing just more and more of these situations. Obviously, in Mali, we saw Al Qaeda take responsibility for an attack that killed
20 or so people.
Yeah, Syria.
That barely got any attention as much as the Paris attacks did.
I think that's the other thing. Like, we've seen a lot of these attacks. There was, I believe, a bombing in Turkey that killed over 100 people. And on the same day as the Paris attacks, I believe there were bombings in Lebanon and Iraq.
Yeah, Baghdad. And those barely got any attention. I didn't even know those were happening until you go on like Twitter and they're all talking about that, and trying to drag that in.
I think definitely it kind of shows people, they really only really care about issues if they directly affect them, they scare them. But overall, I think that we've at least now people are starting to do something, but I really hope this isn't going to be one of those issues where you see people...
passes on.
They change their profile picture on Facebook to the French flag, and then after about a week, it's over.
Yeah.
So I think people, they need to acknowledge that this is real. I mean, ISIS is clearly, they aren't getting weak. President Obama went on, because it was the same day, which now nobody remembers, that we believe that we took out Jihad John.
Yeah.
And I remember the whole morning, everybody was so happy. I was reading all these articles, and mom was like, ISIS is on the run. Yeah. I thought it was the end. And then when on my way home from school, I checked my phone, and I see there's shooting in Paris, and it just kind of escalated from there. And it's just been...
It's close to home. I think that's what does it the most. You have really strong connections there, definitely.
But still, I'm a little nervous, though, because I feel like, is it close to home enough for people to continue to care?
We still have time to stop it. That's the worst part. Obama's not doing enough.
No, definitely not. I think that's a big problem. We've just been so absent from the world stage that we just, we're seeing these things happen. So, I suppose... so many people have different opinions on whether or not we should have gone to Iraq or not.
Right.
But I think you can definitely state whether you had Saddam there or the U.S. Army there. If you had a force there, ideally I would suppose a democratic government, which unfortunately was overthrown or is pretty much in chaos at this point. And the northern Iraq has been overthrown. When you see that, the fact that we pulled out the way we did without leaving anything behind stable, it's very unfortunate that we're seeing such weak foreign policy.
I think that's why people are scared of having another war in Iraq and Syria. They think, oh, just because the war in Iraq, this might happen again. And
that's because people have really, really are hating on the war in Iraq, when I think that definitely some people have their reasons for disliking the war, and those are completely justified to some extent. But you definitely have to acknowledge it's better than at least having a democratic Iraq in general.
It's better than having a dictator.
It's better than having a brutal dictator who kills hundreds of thousands of people. And if you look in Syria, we're seeing their own people being gassed by this guy. And now President Obama's considering, he was considering actually going to the table and saying we might be willing to keep Assad. That's what it's starting to look like. But then Putin stepped in and said that now the fate of Assad should be decided by the Syrians. So that could definitely be something that I guess the U.S. can grab onto and say, okay, hopefully the Syrians won't want him, so Putin can win, so the Russians are happy, and hopefully we might be able to look like we win, so then Obama can be happy.
Yeah.
But speaking of Syria, there's been another big issue that's been going on that we haven't covered, the refugees.
Yep, that's right.
So, what are your thoughts on the refugee crisis?
Well, they're coming to, because Canada and America are saying that they will accept refugees, and here in our state they're accepting refugees as well.
So only certain states have been saying that they'll accept
open
refugees.
to accepting refugees. Mm-hmm. And someone had a good analogy of this on, it might have been Facebook. There's a jar of M&Ms. And they're like 20 of these 100, or not 100, but like 500 M&Ms are poisonous. Would you reach in and grab and eat
so like
those
you have
M&Ms?
like 500 M&Ms and 5 are poisoned.
Yeah.
Do you want to reach in?
Yeah. And they're asking that to, like, the liberals. And that's a good point, because that's a good analogy, and that almost connects to this, because there could be a couple bad apples in the refugees you accept.
And I think that's the problem, because I mean, they're in a terrible plight. They're stuck in probably one of the worst situations we've seen since the Yugoslav wars, that we've seen that anybody could be stuck in the world right now. And it's very unfortunate. But I think one of the other problems is that it kind of shows a lack of responsibility on the part of, right now, the governments of, I suppose, Canada, as Justin showed, he's pulled out of Iraq, but now he's open to refugees.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, and Obama the same thing, we're saying, so we aren't going to do anything about the situation that we have responsibility for.
Right.
It's the same thing that Hillary Clinton said. She said that there needs to be a massive attack on ISIS that needs to be American-led, but no American troops should be involved. So
how do you do
we're
that?
going to force the people in that country I'm not saying that it should just be U.S. troops, but we're going to force them to fight and die without any help from the U.S., but they have to obey our command in a war that, debatably, we bear most of the responsibility, a situation that we bear the responsibility for being in.
That doesn't work.
And I think it's the same problem. We're saying, okay, we understand that the situation in Syria is insane, it's out of control. I believe Bernie Sanders said it well when he said it's a quagmire within a quagmire.
Right.
But then we're saying, so it's terrible, we won't do anything about it, we'll just kind of keep feeding it, we'll make a situation, we'll take the refugees, and we're just going to not do a single thing, we're just going to leave an environment that keeps creating refugees.
I mean, people are pointing out things you could make like safe zones, and I think that's actually a really noble idea to have like occupied areas that are safe for just, Syrian refugees in general. And the Middle East should be more open to holding them, because there was actually a picture that said that the Saudi Arabian government has 3 million air-conditioned tents in this one area. Why don't you just send them there instead of having them come to the West?
I think, but that's the other thing though, I think they've definitely seen the same issue with the analogies. But with Saudi Arabia in particular, I was surprised by that, because Saudi Arabia was, unfortunately, one of originally the main backers of ISIS in the beginning, before they became. Once they were big enough, they kind of cut off funding. The Saudis cut their funding, but it was too late to stop them. But I think clearly we're seeing an issue in the Gulf states. But the other thing is, if we don't create a Middle East that isn't constantly producing refugees, then we're never going to see the end of it. We're never going to see a conclusion to this conflict. Unfortunately, but the problem is we aren't seeing anybody willing to step up and say, it might not be the most popular decision, but if we don't do it, and we don't do it now, and we don't do it firmly, it's never going to end.
I feel like Obama only cares about his approval ratings. He's not willing to actually solve the problem.
Yeah, at this point, he's just, I think, that's one of the problems, like pulling out Iraq, he was just trying to check off items on his list of things that he said he'd do, without actually giving any thought to, is this really the best decision?
How to solve the real problem.
And now they're pushing to close Gitmo, they're pushing to do all these things without actually really thinking through. I mean, if you look at it, majority of, I think, Obama's foreign policy decisions and just haven't really been all that well thought out.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think by extension, as at least earlier in Obama's presidency, that it extends to Hillary Clinton, as she was Secretary of the State at the time during all of these issues. Yeah. So I think that's
pretty solid.
Unfortunate.
So should we read off our Instagram followers?
Okay, so obviously we will read off Instagram followers who follow us on the Unnamed Political Podcast, at Unnamed Political Podcast on Instagram. And people who comment, obviously they will get their favorite in the shoutouts. So would you like to read off the we recently posted Thanksgiving post, which some of you were very
creative.
pleased by.
We have almost 1,200 followers.
Yeah.
And we'll crack soon. Alright, so let me see them. So Austin_Ritter, that's RITTER_.
Thank you very much, Austin.
Hotline Trump, Shout out to you.
Nice name.
City Girl 597.
Okay.
Shout out to you. M Summer 3.
Okay.
Shout out to you.
Yeah, that's a friend of ours.
And M Cormier 5.
Mitchell.
Shout out to you too.
Your comments are always appreciated.
All right.
So, I suppose, please tell us again in the comment section below what you or on the Instagram.
Any suggestions?
Yeah, what you want to see to improve, what you want to see in the future of the podcast.
Guest hosts, potentially.
Yeah. If any of you know us personally or would like to email us, we'd love to have you guys as guest hosts.
We're trying to get some new people on.
Unfortunately, as we said in the previous episode, we were hoping to have guest hosts on this time, but unfortunately the deal fell through at the last minute, which was very unfortunate.
Hopefully in the next couple of weeks we can get them on.
Yeah, hopefully. We can get some more on soon. But overall, tell us what you want. We're still working on the newsletter idea. Again, we love your feedback on it. But I suppose I think that covers it for us.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. I'm Clark Wahlberg.
I'm Jack Orvath.
See you next time.
Adios.